Hi, it's Leah from Invoke Spirit. I'm a medical intuitive and healer, and today I wanted to talk about my story. I wanted to share how I became a medical intuitive. It was never intentional. It's more a story of reluctance and resistance, and to me, also magic and purpose. So there's a whole backstory. I'm going to try not to talk too much about that because I could start from birth and go through my whole life, but I wasn't born as a fourth generation psychic. You often hear that term. If I was, I didn't know about it. But and I also didn't have any conscious ability to access my intuition. There were moments, and I feel like there's a lot of people out there who have psychic abilities and don't know about it. And so there were times where it was like, oh, is there something there? But I could never consciously access it. But when I got to uni, there was a time where I really wanted to be a doctor. Or I thought that would be a really cool thing. I studied environmental engineering and I did a minor in biomedical engineering because that would be an avenue to move into doing the GAMSAT and then becoming a doctor. And then in my fourth year, I realized that I really had no interest in sitting in an office all day, giving out scripts and taking about possibly 7 years of my life to get to that point, to just spend the rest of my life in an office and handing out prescriptions. So I parked that, but some part of me was never satisfied and wanted to do a natural therapy, and I'd look up books about acupuncture and things like that, but nothing really landed until one day I was working as an engineer, and there was a girl who was seeing a kinesiologist, and I said, oh, what's that? And she goes, oh, I can't really explain it to you, you need to go find out. So I went and somehow found myself starting to do the course, and then I was meeting people in the course who were doing this specific training, and I said, oh, what's that about? And someone said to me, oh, I can't really explain it, you need to go to the course and find out for yourself. So I found myself in this course in a circle starting to do intuitive readings of people, which was not at all what I was expecting. And there's a whole backstory to that, the amount of fear and bodily reactions to that terror and fear when I went through that. But over time, I knew I was onto something that really stirred my heart, and I dedicated myself to developing that skill and learning and benefiting others with that and things like that. But then I came to the point where I wanted to start my business, so I did that, and I noticed that there were a lot of healers who, especially new healers and people studying, that lacked intuition. I saw this gap, so I created this course, Intuition for Healers, and part of me was never sure where that would go. So it was only a one-day course. It wasn't really long enough to support people into learning intuition. So I knew that the next course would be Advanced Intuition for Healers, but I had no idea what that would be. And I kind of just left it, sat with the absolute tension about that, and did the course, and just kind of, it was just almost like percolating behind the scenes. And then my husband said, oh, let's go on a trip. Let's go down south. So I can't remember where we went, on New Year's Day in 2014. And we're traveling down there, and I was sort of sitting there looking at the scenery, and this idea popped in my head, something about using the body and the intuition technique that I'd learned. And I sort of played on with it with myself, and what I saw was my liver was on the couch. It was exhausted and lethargic, couldn't get up, and that was, I thought, that's me right now. That's how my life is at the moment. So I really liked the resonance of that, and I kind of played with it. And after a few weeks, I tuned in, and I thought, okay, well, what do you want me to do with this technique, that's sort of this little idea that's come through? And I got clear guidance to put it out to people who'd also studied, people who'd also studied intuition. And so I did that, following that, thinking I'd get maybe 5 or 6 people, and I got about 25 people. And that's when I started to freak out. I saw they were telling me that they had all these medical conditions, and I simply went to the bathroom, locked myself in there, and freaked out. And then I started swearing. I said "F you" to my guides and the universe and intuition. I felt really unsafe. Felt like I was going to be persecuted, or I'd have to be compared to Caroline Mace or something like that. And I just was very angry. And after I had my tanty, I got out of the bathroom and went to the computer and booked each of them in one by one. And over a few weeks of time, I basically did the readings. And what really was noticeable from all those medical conditions was that they sort of had a few categories. So there was a few that were clearly structural. There was a couple of hormonal, and then there was like the mysterious illnesses, or the ones that just couldn't, or chronic illnesses. And so then from that, these different techniques formed of my medical intuition. Well, I didn't call it then because I refused to use that term. But and so when I did the readings on people, I started noticing things like, well, if someone had a B12 deficiency, like how did I know that? I didn't know how I knew the things I knew, but someone had diabetes, and people had tendencies for heart attack and stroke, and someone, I was like, oh, from what I'm getting, you should have been dead by now. Like, but you, because of the work that you've been doing, you've actually negated that hereditary thing that you've received, and things like that. Or I didn't know how I knew what I knew. And readings where, like, I saw someone had a bubble in the kidney, and I was just, I don't even know that that's possible. And they're like, oh yeah, actually my tests came back and showed that. And it's like things like that, which kind of blew my mind a lot. And so I ran with it, and after I did that, I had like almost like a crash course in learning about diseases and learning about health, even though I had all the previous training, even learning about the anatomy to that. But I offered it to the public for free for a little while, and then I started offering it for a small fee, and it was quite a rough ride, actually. I never called it medical intuition in the first few years. I was very resistant and fearful, and actually, when I found out that people would book in, I'd freak out. Like, if I didn't know them, I didn't want to do the reading on them. But I just kept moving forward because there's something else inside of me that was like, I can't give this up. For my own personal benefit, doing the readings on myself, I'd gained so much. It just felt like I was cheating the world by just keeping it to myself. So anyway, so it kind of kept on going like that. And it was about possibly 2016 or early 2017 that I started to call it distinctly medical intuition, and to claim myself that I was a medical intuitive. Around 2016, I did the Advanced Intuition for Healer pilot, and I did train a few people in that. And that in itself was a crash course for me in understanding even deeper about the body systems and the intricate interweaving that our body, like all the systems, have in our body. And also developing my 7 root causes to illness, because I needed to share that and convey that to people, be able to teach that. So yeah, it was it was an extreme apprenticeship by myself. Maybe I wasn't alone. Maybe I have helpers in the other world, but it was very scary. I didn't have the reassurance that I had when I was studying the kinesiology or studying intuition, where they could tell me the mistakes that I've already gone through and convey that to me, and also have colleagues that I had with me that I could, share my problems with. I didn't have all that. I had just myself and trying to figure out what this thing wanted from me. So over the years, I've had all sorts of readings. I've had emergency cases. Usually they're seeing a doctor, which is good, because I wouldn't want them to just rely on a medical intuitive. You need all the support that you can get. I have non-emergency cases, a lot more of those, and structural issues. The most common ones are like thyroid, headaches, and gut issues. They're the ones that I consider the most common, and they're probably the most common in our society. So it's probably reflective of what's happening. And, you know, of course, there's people with mysterious symptoms and people who have had medical tests and the doctors have just said, no, we can't give you, we've basically used up all our resources and understanding of this and you're just going to have to live with this. So through all that, like I feel quite blessed, like even though I was reluctant and even though it felt terrifying and everything, I feel also quite blessed that this opportunity was created for me, provided for me, whatever that is, because I've learned so much about the body and the health through the process. Like it's like the gift is that instead of me learning from a theoretical point of view, which is what I did, like at university, I learned the body anatomy, and then again I learned it from my natural health training and through all the different courses. And I love learning about the body, but to learn through this different way where you're merging with the body and the body's telling you stuff and you're sort of gaining, you get this higher guidance coming and telling you what's really going on, which is kind of sometimes not what a lot of the theoretical textbooks tell you. Sometimes sometimes it's very black and white, and sometimes it's just something completely different. And starting to be able to see it from a different perspective, have been told the story behind the disease, like how they came to their current state of health and the things that led up to it, the root causes, understanding between transient kind of illnesses, which are kind of like they just happen to you and you happen, and then also ones that are systemic, you know, like that you were born with or that your particular makeup is just tending towards, and just the amazing intricacy and complexity about the body. I find it really amazing. So that's my story. It's not over, obviously, like I'm still going, and though I feel like the medical intuitive readings, they're more, I call it like at the beginning, they're kind of like a pilot or conceptual stage, but they go through generations, and those readings have kind of stabilized into something quite consistent. My favorite is the body system reading over more the hormonal, the structural stuff, but you know, all of them have basically stabilized. But even new stuff's coming through, like this weak spots reading, like that's probably the biggest gain that I've had through doing the medical intuition on myself. And it was a training in itself, being able to look into myself and see things like a tendency towards osteoporosis, or seeing like part of my liver that was kind of necrotizing almost at that time, not so much now, but you know, to be able to see that and not freak out, like having the character or the skill to be able to sit with it and receive that about myself, you know, about like the possible dangers of my own health, but then always being given guidance about what the next steps are to take, and the reassurance that someone has my back, you know. So yeah, the weak spots reading is like the big thing, that the weak spots in my own body, I feel, has been a big gift to me. So that's what I'm sort of bringing to it at the moment. Anyway, that's my story. It's a little bit of a long story, but thanks for listening. And in the meantime, feel free to ask any questions below. Look out for my next videos. I do want to talk about how the medical intuition works and also what constitutes a good or bad reading. So wishing you the very best of health. Bye.